Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. Who could complain? Who could complain on a day like today? Well, I have a complaint. The stupid chat thing is getting lost again, so I got to go into YouTube and see, because I saw for a split second that there were plenty of messages. Plenty of messages. I got to go view my channel. I got to pull this up. I got to see the live chat. There we go. There we go. Jared says, planning to attend my first Bitcoin meetup tomorrow. That's what it's all about, man. The Bitcoin meetups are the best. We love the Bitcoin meetups. Well done, Covey. Keep it up, CB says. Ben, good morning, team. Who is John Galt? Indeed. Jumper, DCS. Yo, much love, Bitcoiners. Can't wait for the NPC news updates. They're almost here. We got some good ones today. A beautiful Sunrise Tech working in Minnesota, Lightning Vend has let us know. All right, I'll jump over. Sorry I didn't get to a lot of the ones that are here. It's the weird feature, the punishment. Keep waking up the world, folks. Jumper DCS World says, indeed, that's our job. That's our job these days. Jevy, good morning. You are all beautiful people, and we are winning. Aren't we? Aren't we winning? Isn't it great? We're going to talk about all the winning today. Mega winning. Live long and prosper with Bitcoin, says Defina. Indeed. Good morning, John. T-Dog Yo-Yo. Good morning, gang. Good morning, T-Dog. Beaumatin. Good morning, Bitcoiners. TGIF. Indeed. Good morning, Johnny. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Jevy getting a salute from CB. Indeed, we're going to win. Bonjour, Nolan. Noha Simsa says, bonjour, bonjour, Noah. Happy Friday, Breakup gang. Indeed, Tommy in the house with a good morning. East Side Tony, not living in the East Side, living in California. Good morning, East Side Tony. We love East Side Tony. Good morning, brother. Good morning, Hammersaw. All right, let's just acknowledge we got a major sunrise operational tech happening here on the Atlantic Ocean in North America, sort of. And Bitcoin's running. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Jeez. I've been having weird, bumpy everything. It's been a bit of a runaround morning. Assalam, Fiat, Alt left key, Bitcoin alt right key. Yeah, I was going for the key patterns today, right? Shift+Control+Delete, of course, is the pattern for erasing your history. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we erase our history, let's talk about the fakest news I could find. What's the fakest news I could find today? We've got some good stuff. Today's a good day in Moscow time. Today's a great day in Moscow time. Let's start with the WHO Director General. You know, Tedros. I love when Tedros comes and tells me what to do with my life. It's one of my favorite things. You know, and this guy comes in and tells me what's going to happen and all this stuff. Tedros. He says, our food systems are harming the health of the people and planet. He's right so far. Transforming food systems is therefore essential. He's right on. By shifting towards healthier, diversified, and more plant-based diets. But he's missing one. We get this from the Daily Mail. This was published 3 days ago. I ate cricket meat mince, and it was delicious. Here's why. You should all be eating insects. Tedros missed the insects. Come on. You missed the insects. I love how they call it cricket meat. Meat. So much meat. This one's really good. This comes from NBC News. Are you ready? NBC News, not projecting. This is this is just the way news organizations talk. There is no evidence that COVID vaccines cause fatal cardiac arrest or other deadly heart problems in teens and young adults. A CDC report finds there's no evidence, guys. None. Okay? A new analysis, the analysis, guys, it debunks widespread misinformation about the mRNA vaccine. So if you need to know what's going on, go read this analysis and study. And it's totally true. It's totally true. You don't need to do the experiment yourself. Just listen. It totally debunks. It totally debunks. Okay? It's debunked. And there's no evidence. There's none that young people are being affected with their heart and the vaccine. There's no evidence, guys. Whoever told you there's evidence is fucking lying to you. Okay? Now, the same people that write headlines like that, not the same people that did the studies that totally debunk, but the same headline writers, the same quality of person, wrote the following headline, right? Legendary athlete, actor, and millionaire. O.J. Simpson's murder trial lost him the American dream. OJ lost the American dream from his murder trial. Now, this one's really good. All right. So we had another Stephanie Elam, or something like that, was on CNN. And I'm going to read what she said about the OJ Simpson trial. Okay. This was aired on CNN yesterday. Okay. This is a real talking head who actually said this out loud about OJ Simpson. All right. Where's Norm Macdonald today? I mean, Norm Macdonald would be having the greatest day of his life, right? He loved the O.J. Simpson jokes. So ready? This is what a journalist said today. So many people were just happy to see that someone who is rich and famous and black could get away with what other people did in the system as well, too. I'm going to read it again. So many people were just happy to see that someone who's rich and famous and black could get away with what other people did in the system as well, too. Thank you, Simulation, for providing us with O.J. Simpson and his timely death here in 2024, right at the height of credibility of the media. It's perfect. A return to the O.J. Simpson dialogue. So there you go. That's what we got. Now, today's theme is Shift+Control+Delete of the USD. It's really about the USD system. It's the propagation of the USD system. We talk about this all the time, of course, right? How does Bitcoin propagate? Contrast that with how Fiat propagates, right? Bitcoin propagates by people running their nodes. And also, when people will go into the Memetic knowledge that Bitcoin is, 21 million scarce supply. Well, I saw someone write today, it's not exactly that, right? It's that we all believe ourselves individually in the 21 million and the inability to print more. It's not that there are 21 million and that someone says they can't print more and that memetic knowledge allows us to propagate Bitcoin. It's not exactly that. It's more that we all believe in it enough that we can propagate the network. So belief in the systems and the verifiability in the case of Bitcoin is really important, right? We can verify. We don't have to trust that 21 million is there. We don't have to trust that no one can print more. We just have to verify the ability to do those two things, right? So, of course, we understand that Bitcoin propagates through these very simple techniques. The simplicity is what makes many of us attracted to Bitcoin propagation. Of course, Fiat is a much more complicated business to propagate, right? You need to coordinate the energy industry. You need to coordinate the news media. Of course, Fiat is word-based money, right? Fiat literally means declaration by the government. So the money itself must have the declarations by the government propagate in such a way that the whole network goes forward. And one of the key aspects of that propagation is the news media. It's a power supernode within the entire system, right? The military too. We'll talk about the other things, sanctions of the actual rails on which the money flows. But nevertheless, one of the most important in Fiat is the propagation of the words that support the entire Fiat system, which is money based on government declarations. So we've been just having a great time watching the media lose this ability to propagate the network. And we're seeing it here, right? RFK is now talking about that interview he had on CNN last week that was so devastating. You're out of focus, somewhat blurry. Is that so? Let me see what's going on here. Video, HD camera. Okay, I can go up a little. How about now? Did that do anything to the quality of the video? Let me know if the quality of the video got better. OJ had one of the finest attorney lineups in the history of law. No kidding, huh? And they use the rhymes, right? I love the rhymes. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. So good. Better? Okay, good. Better. Whoa, 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 whoa. It's the price we pay for a beautiful background environment. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, whoops. I wanted to read this one because it's right on what we're talking about. Fiat currency is based on debt. negative balances, enforcement, taxes, punishment, lies, and censorship. Censorship is what we're talking about here. It's a complicated and hard to keep up, not to mention depressing. Yeah. 4K UHD Nolan. Yeah. I think I've been in that. I think I've been in that. It could be your Wi-Fi connection. It says it's pretty good. All's well. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we had RFK now talking about that interview he did on CNN a couple of weeks back, 2 weeks back or whatever. So Daniel says, we are truly witnessing the Fiat apocalypse, but at least you're getting to watch it from beautiful, let me get back to your previous, rainy green mountains. They're not quite green yet, though, Daniel. They'll be green when I get back. I should be there next week. So RFK talking about that CNN interview, and this is what he says. He says that Aaron Burnett, who was the person who was interviewing, he says that her brain stopped working. Her brain stopped working while he made a stunning argument against Biden on CNN. This was the time when he was talking about Biden being worse for democracy. So this is how he describes it. She had this kind of astonished look. Her brain stopped working, Kennedy says. There's no court that's found that President Trump tried to steal the election or tried to derail the election or tried to start an insurrection. However, there's courts that have found that President Biden was censoring his opponents. And not just me, Robert Kennedy added, although he did censor me and did win, and I did win that lawsuit. So it's not me making it up. They had to come up with a new word to describe my post. And the word is malinformation, he says. It's not misinformation or disinformation, it's malinformation, which is information that is factually correct, but is nevertheless inconvenient for the government. So malinformation. And you're non. Maybe if I move it back. If I move it back and give it more to focus on, it might stop doing that. I'm not seeing anything, so that's the issue here, guys. It looks totally normal and fine to me. It looks like total HD, amazing quality. We'll see how that did. Anyway, so when we think of the propagation of Fiat, and we consider the capacity for the news to propagate this network, what's happening is it simply can't do the job anymore. Look how pathetic it is, right? Look at how absolutely pathetic it is. You've got CNN and you've got RFK in this case. You had yesterday AOC on the fake news, on Stephen Colbert, the fakest of the fake news, the late night comedy shows. And they're trying to pump this whole student loan repayment thing like it's just the most important thing in politics. When you go, I can't even find fake news anymore on MSNBC or Washington Post because they only publish abortion stories now. That's it. It's just abortion stories. Go check it out. Abortion, whatever. For days, it's just abortion, right? So they are trying to make that the number one issue. The only real good news they have, according to them, is the student loan thing. So you had AOC on there yesterday, but everyone's laughing because she was trying to sell what you can do, the financial advantages that come with having your loans repaid. And she goes in and says, they can go back to school. So I've been having a good laugh at that today. But yesterday, we also had, you remember the CBS reporter, Catherine Herridge, the only fake news journalist that bothered authenticating the Hunter Biden laptop, and then she was fired, and then she was not allowed back in her office, and then her materials were taken, and then they tried to find out who her sources were. All things we've never seen before, all sort of unprecedented in American media. Here's what she said. She was testifying at Congress yesterday. She testified exactly to this. The company locked her out of her building and seized all her files, fearing she was working with sources to expose government corruption. Imagine the predicate for this kind of behavior to her is that she was going to expose corruption. That's the same malinformation argument that RFK was talking about, right? So malinformation, it's gotten to the point where it's not even one argument versus the other. It's inconvenient arguments that are true that have to be suppressed because the system is so weak that it will take it down. It will literally take it down. If they let any one of these stories start spreading and metastasizing, it's going to take down the whole system. That's how fragile it is, right? You've got Colin Rugg going on further, saying nothing at all going on here, folks. CBS News decision to seize her reporting records crossed a red line that he believes should never be crossed by any media organization. But it's not just that, right? We've got the situation in Brazil with X, and we're finding out all kinds of stuff about the collusion again, just like we found it in America. The two most censored events in human history, according to Mike Benz, being the 2020 election and the COVID-19 pandemic. The Brazilian election that happened right after would be a close follow-up to that. All the same practices, all the same maneuvers were used. We found out from the latest Twitter files release. Now, if you listen to Mike Benz, he's saying this is all U.S. State Department. This is all the U.S. State Department practicing techniques that they want to perfect in time for the U.S. elections. So this is the same story we've seen, we cover every day here. This is all about the Fiat node propagation that can't have any infringement on its own media entities, which are bought, paid for, and collude with this system in order to simulate reality, for these ones to just continue to practice their techniques and then deploy them in America. But it doesn't look like it's working. It doesn't look like it's working. It looks like this information, the ability to stop malinformation, as they call it, or the ability for other information to come through, is too powerful now for what we understand as the Fiat nodes to stop it. And one of the reasons, this comes from David Deutsch, who is a cryptographer, one of the smartest people going in the world. And here's what he's talking about when he talks about education. Big homeschooler, by the way, David Deutsch, huge homeschooler. Here's what he says. He says, education is conceived at present is entirely the transmission of memes. Now, without the transmission of memes, we would be reinventing the wheel all the time. So it's highly desirable that memes be transmitted. It's also highly desirable that they not be transmitted faithfully, because otherwise there won't be improvement. And if there's anything worse than having to reinvent the wheel, it's having no improvement, because whereas reinventing the wheel all the time is terribly inefficient, not having improvement is fatal. It's certainly fatal. And again, when I talk about the inability for the mainstream media to propagate news that would help propagate the Fiat system, what really happened here is that everything became a little too complicated. Everything became difficult to explain to people. The financial engineers spun the system so far out of the comprehension of most people that even censorship, even fake education, let's call it, even brainwashing, doesn't really work to help propagate the system anymore. The questions that people have, the confusion they have about the system, their distaste for the system as it is starting to become strong enough that people won't bother learning, and they're going to look for new knowledge. And the idea of 21 million in the case of Bitcoin, limited supply, hard money, all the memes that came from that are much easier for people to understand. Now, Tim Dillon has a way of explaining this, talking here from the Diary of a CEO. I guess it's a book he wrote. I'm not sure what's going on. I've seen it around. People are reading it everywhere. What he says here is that Gen Z has figured out that the country is a scam. He says they invent mental health ailments that they don't have. They take days off on end. They terrify their superiors into respecting their mediocre, shoddy quality of work. This is something that I fully support. So Tim Dillon here is saying that the younger generation is definitely not getting fooled by this stuff and are using most of it to their advantage and are sort of culture jamming all of this stuff and turning it on its head, right? And when we think of the ability for Bitcoiners to propagate our own memes, look at how simple they are. They're just shit talking. It's just a couple of pictures on the internet. It's nothing like the architecture that Fiat requires. The fault tolerance of Fiat requires all of this stuff to work with precision. They need to have their military grade precision brainwashing operating at high capacity all the time with nearly 100% conversion, or the whole system fails. I talk often about fault tolerance and what it means. Bitcoin's fault tolerance is, of course, 51%, right? It can tolerate 49% dissent, 49% corrupt actors, 49% scammers, and the system will still work, right? That's the fault tolerance of Bitcoin. You'll hear, if you get into cryptographic principles, because of course in cryptography, the thing that separates it from normal consumer tech or computer science is the adversarial environment. You're in an environment where there are people who are trying to harm you, destroy you, steal from you, And that makes it very different than normal board games, let's say, or any other type of system, right? Or any other type of just pure academic knowledge. When you're in the environment where you're dealing with, and what removes it from engineering, in engineering, the adversarial environments are all knowns. It's the constant of gravity, or the predictability of light waves, or just normal physical properties from Newtonian physics or quantum physics. But nevertheless, there are things that you can apply and that are predictable and give you these results, right? But it's not exactly the same when it comes to cryptography because of this adversarial environment. So the idea here being that if Fiat doesn't have its high conversion rate of brainwashing, the system can't survive. Now, what is the number? The number is, we're making it up. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's much higher than Bitcoin, right? The Fiat system cannot sustain a high number. It can't sustain 49% of dissidents. It will fail, right? In a world where everyone who's on the government side all votes and they manage to eke out 51%, then it can survive 49%. But I don't think we're in that world, right? At 49%, the thing crumbles because no one's paying their taxes, no one's participating. I'd say we're only at, how many people are like us that know what's going on in the news, that follow all the stuff, that can name some of these people, know all these issues? We're less than 1%, right? It's less than 1%. And look at the damage that's done from less than 1% of Americans knowing that it's a scam. Now, I think the number of Americans that know the whole thing's a scam is much higher. I'm talking about the ones that know the details of the scam, right? So the ones that know the details of the scam, it's 1%. And the damage we've caused to Fiat and all of these institutions at 1% is mortal. These are mortal wounds that can't survive. So, and it goes further, right? It's not just the news, it's also the weaponization of the banking system. If the weaponization of the banking system isn't keyed in, if they don't have all the other countries participating in the American dollar scam, then it suffers the same kind of critical threat, right? And that's already happening. So we saw yesterday, there's some news out there, Mario Nawfal saying that, we got Janet Yellen, Janet Yellen's over in China right now, right? Our favorite, Janet Yellen, all right? The actual plan, I don't mean this as hyperbole or a joke or whatever. The actual plan to keep this Fiat system running, to transcend the fault tolerance, is to send Janet Yellen, again, the second time this year, over to China to go beg the Chinese to buy US debt. That's the plan to keep it on the rails, guys. And I'm not kidding. This is what's happening. So she goes over there. This is what we know about her, right? About the trip. She goes over to China. Right? And what happens over in China? Well, things aren't going her way, right? So she goes over to China and she begs them to buy US treasuries and to sanction the Russians because of the Ukraine war, right? What do we find out, right? So where's my Janet Yellen picture here? Well, what we find out is she goes over there, they say, sure, no problem, right? We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to sanction Russia. It turns out they might have, right? This is what we found out from Mario Nawfal. China blocks Russian payments for tech. Russian companies are struggling to buy critical electronic components from China after banks in the country reportedly began to block payments from them. It's believed the payments are being declined due to the broad sweeping U.S. sanctions against Russian companies over the war in Ukraine. So that's the plan, right? So Janet Yellen goes over there, says, buy our debt, sanction Russia. You can't keep doing this kind of stuff. But no one's buying it, right? No one's buying it. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Russia's truly been sanctioned. But guess what this also opens up the world to? Guess what void and vacuum this creates? Well, I don't think Russia and China are just going to stop trading because Janet Yellen went over there and started nagging them, right? I don't think that's how it's going to work. So this might actually force them into something even more opaque than BRICS. This might even force them into stable coins or Bitcoin, right? So the unintended consequences of Janet Yellen heading over there could be really funny, right? They could be really funny. We'll see what happens, but she's on all this stuff, but it looks like it ain't going to be enough. So she went to China, right? But what happened next door? Well, we had the Japanese prime minister in America the past few days. But now China buying US debt is one thing, right? The important Jen Elon's over there trying to do it, trying to get the network going. Because it's not just the news. China has to be involved. The sanctions have to work, right? The sanctions that the US government financial system imposes on other banks that don't belong to the system must work, again, 100% of the time, or else you start having BRICS and other things, right? So maybe the transactions they're talking about, the Chinese transactions with the Russians, I'm not sure exactly what part of the plumbing this is all happening in, which rails, is it Swift rails, is it others? I don't know. But I'm certain that Russian banks are creating their own settlement system. They're talking about it all the time. It will look something like a stablecoin settlement system. So, yeah, but for trade, I'm talking about for trade. They're not savings. I'm not telling everyone to save stable coins. I'm saying for trade, they work just fine. And they've been working fine for many years between China and Russia. The stablecoin volumes that you see out there, a lot of them come from the Russian-Chinese trading. That's been going on since before the war. That was a big, there's like caravans of Chinese merchants that go into Russia all the time, and then they come back. And they all operate on stablecoins. So we sent a journalist there many, many years ago, a Russian girl. We sent her when I was working with CoinDesk over to investigate all this stuff. It was a great piece. I think we published it in 2018 or something like that. So, this thing has to keep going or else. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Japan having all of these changes, and it looks like now, again, one of the things I've been saying for a long time is that Satoshi Nakamoto's name was chosen because having the moral authority or the experience or the credibility of being Japanese in 2008 was everything. Because what it came down to was someone who was intimate with the Japanese system saying to America that after you bail out the banks and the auto companies and everything else that happened in the financial crisis in 08, you're going to be Japan. You're going to have decades of zero to low interest. You're going to create this huge glut. You're going to create this huge problem in your society. What they called the lost decade in Japan in the 90s went a lot further, right? It's still here now. Japan has not been able to create inflation. I know when I first started going to Japan 20 years ago, when I lived there during the financial crisis in 08 and 09, and I had gone many times before that. I started going in 2002, 2003, 2004. I spent years over there. So things at the time were kind of expensive. There was this thought, if you were a kid in the 90s, that Japan was an expensive place because rent was expensive. Tokyo was the most expensive city going. Now, if you go to Japan to this day, you can spend a lot of money if you feel like it, right? You can go to beautiful cafes where a cup of coffee is $30. I paid $30 for a glass of Coke before, right? In Japan. So depending on where you are. But at the same time, because they haven't had any inflation, because they haven't been able to juice their economy, most things are still cheap. You can get a $5 lunch there. You can get 1990s prices on almost anything. And now rent, things that were expensive 30 years ago, right? A $800 a month rent 30 years ago was crazy. $800 a month was a house. Forget about a little one-bedroom apartment in Japan. Nowadays, you can get the same apartments for $500, $600, $700, $800, right? Now, what's happening in Japan is they're trying to now that everyone else in the world has had inflation, the Japanese have lost a tremendous amount of purchasing power. You used to see Japanese tourists everywhere. That was sort of a meme into itself, right? Japanese tourists. You don't see as many anymore. You see Chinese tourists everywhere. And the reason why you don't see many Japanese tourists anymore is because it's too expensive for them. They can stay in their own country. And Japan is one of those unique countries where kind of everything's there, right? It's small, but everything's there. They got the skiing, they got the mountains, they got the lakes, they got the beautiful beaches, they got the tropical islands, they got everything you need. So they don't actually have to go anywhere. They're like Americans or French people, right? There's no need to leave Japan. You can experience any climate in the comfort of your own country without a passport and with your own food. And of course, we know the Japanese are particular about food, right? They love their food. In a particular way. So why should they leave, right? So they haven't. Now, things are getting even more interesting because of what's going on with the Japanese banks raising their own interest rates and making their own bonds more attractive. So that's the whole thing. They had the lost decade because it sent money out of the country for years, right? Because foreign treasury bills and all that stuff, and even just foreign stock exchanges were so much better performing that people would borrow the money for free in Japan, because there was no interest, and they would invest it outside of the country. So this created a huge cash outflow from Japan, something they've got to stop, something they're very interested in stopping. And that's what it looks like is happening, right? So Stack Hodler says the yen carry trade is blowing up in front of us, and Bitcoin is trading above 71,000. Few understand this, mainly because it's nerdy as hell, but it's a big deal. And every investor should at least kind of get it to grasp what's really going on with their portfolio. In simple terms, Japan has kept interest rates artificially super low for over a decade, even lower than the US and Europe. That forced Japanese investors to invest overseas to seek better returns. So over $3 trillion found its way out of Japan to juice other markets, right? And this all works fine until the yen has its own volatility and starts trading at different rates and stuff like that, which is exactly what's happening now. As currency volatility increases, the insurance protection you need to get. So what was happening is they would always hedge their yen with different risk management insurance instruments so that whatever they were getting in from their foreign investments weren't getting denominated in yen. So it created a whole nother situation. But now that yen is volatile, they can't do this as well. So they're looking for another tactic, right? So what do? You sell foreign bonds when they're no longer earn you more than holding a Japanese bond. And if the Japanese bond yields are rising, then that also increases their relative attractiveness, which is also happening now and needs to happen even more to protect the yen from devaluing too much. So Japanese bond yields are surging towards decade-plus highs, as Stack Hodler writes this. This is why people care about the yen and the Japanese government bonds. When yen volatility rises and Japanese government bond yields rise, investment capital flows out of US and EU bonds and back into Japan. When investment capital flows out of the US and EU bonds, then the US and EU bond yields rise. When those yields rise, highly indebted governments like the US start to look even more insolvent than they already look. Why? Because higher yields mean higher interest payments on the debt in the near future. So here's the thing, right? This is what makes it funny. You've got Janet Yellen going over to beg the Chinese, who are just going to fucking lie to her. Would if Janet Yellen showed up nagging you and all you had to do is lie to her and she'd fuck off, would you do it? If you were the Chinese? Would you take Janet Yellen seriously if you were a Chinese communist, capitalist, whatever, right? If you were in the bag for making China rich and you said, well, I could argue with this stupid bitch or I could fucking lie to her, what would you do? I mean, do you think Janet Yellen has got a lie detector on her? Do you think Janet Yellen, who's never had a real job in her life, right? Do you know what Janet Yellen's PhD thesis was on? Do you know what it's on? It was literally how the most efficient whip crack you can come up with, right? So a person who never did anything in her whole life, never had a real job, right? Just teaching in universities and stuff like that. Her PhD, I looked it up. I read her PhD thesis. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. All it is she wanted to know if you give raises and extra stuff to staff, that there's an optimal amount, like an optimum amount before they stop working extra hard, right? So she's like, how do you get people to work evenings and weekends? And what's the threshold of giving them extra money? That's it. That's her whole thing. She got a fucking PhD to find out if you give someone too much, they'll be spoiled. And if you give someone nothing, they won't work hard. But there's an optimal amount of reciprocating debt you can create in someone as a worker. That's her fucking PhD, guys. That's how dumb she is. Imagine writing a PhD on, I need someone to work a little harder. What should I do? I mean, that's it. That's what she wrote her PhD on, right? Of course, I'm probably the only person who ever read it. So it's the dumbest thing any McDonald's manager knew more about what she was talking about in a PhD than she did. I mean, anyone who's had to create a manager shift for a restaurant or anything understands this game way better than her, like way better, right? I've worked I didn't read it for real, right? I sped read it. I'm not going to read Janet Yellen's 1970s fucking PhD for like the whole thing. I was like, what's it about, right? And it didn't take me long to figure it out. I can speed read. I don't know. I mean, pretty fast. So I don't read every word, but I get the gist of things pretty quickly. So Janet Yellen's over there, right, asking the Chinese to like enforce sanctions and buy treasury bills and all this stuff. Meanwhile, Japan's basically telling her she stinks and they're not going to do it because the whole thing sucks. So where does she go next? Where do they send Janet Yellen next? Where is Janet? Where's Janet Yellen? Where is she going to fix America? Right? So she's the best. We love Janet Yellen. She is the greatest thing, right? She has the greatest thing. She's the greatest American US dollar savior we could hope for. She's as good as Joe Biden for us, right? We love Janet Yellen. We love her. I don't know what we would do with the face, with the Bitcoin sign guy. She's in all the memes already. She's perfect, just perfect. So we love her. Never go anywhere, Janet Yellen. This is how Stack Hodler breaks it all down. He goes, it's all a big game of musical chairs, and investors are becoming increasingly aware that there are only 21 million seats or sats. When a wave of debasement hits, you want to be holding the hardest assets you can find, and finite Bitcoin is the hardest asset. With the recent push by BlackRock, it is increasingly perceived as the ark for the coming fiat flood. But there's still plenty of room left on the ark, he's saying here. So indeed, right? You've got all of this going on. You've got this financial tomfoolery happening everywhere. You've got Americans opening their eyes to our inability to allocate capital efficiently at all. And our allocation of capital is being reversed on us, right? One of the main things rich conservatives and all kinds of Americans give to are these NGOs, right? Now we're starting to find out that the entire abortion NGO thing was a complete and total scam on conservatives by conservatives. You've got Cernovich just going into the, what are they called? They're the, they got to file some, NGOs have to file some tax paper. He's been saying the name. I forget what it is. I've never filed one. So Cernovich is saying here, start an organization to raise awareness, pay yourself a big salary, non-profit, covers all travel to appear on podcasts, hold galas, and pay friends speaking fees. Claim this is all for the cause. Fundraise off these efforts and repeat the cycle. Everyone gets rich. This has been going on in abortion in America for a long time. It's the same as the DEI racist grift on the Democrats, right? They don't want to stop racism. The Black Lives Matter people never wanted to stop racism. If racism stops, their money stops. Just like if conservatives are satisfied with abortion in America, the abortion money stops. They can't fundraise off it anymore, right? So that's why you see right now The Atlantic and MSNBC and Washington Post trying to lure conservatives into the abortion fight because they're obsessed with it, right? They're just completely obsessed with it. Can we abort Janet Yellen? Well, if you ask a Democrat, right, I think they said that I think Whoopi Goldberg said on her show the other day that mothers can abort their kids thousands of years after they're born. She said that. She really did say that, which is hilarious, right? Joshua Steinman talking here about Cernovich's quote saying, this is how it works, folks. So many nonprofits, many political fights are part of a system that allows the laptop class, former Hill staff, plus journalists, plus think tankers to afford $1 million homes in McLean, Virginia, and shop at Whole Foods. All these galas, mailers, it's a grift, right? And indeed, that's what Americans are waking up to, that because we don't even have any perception on money, we don't even know how much money we're spending on our own brainwashing. We don't even know how much money are conservatives giving to brainwash themselves in ways that will ruin their lives. I mean, the number is high. No one can even tell what the number is, right? No one can even tell what it is. So if the fiat system is losing, and the NGOs, I've said for a long time that the reason why Canada is so full of idiots and why it's the stupidest country of all the Anglosphere countries. Now, I always mention I haven't spent any time in New Zealand and I haven't spent any time in Australia, and I don't care if I ever go there either, because I know what I'm going to find, a bunch of retarded Canadian types. So I don't need to go there. I'll just wait for summer to come around and I can experience Australia in Canada. So the reason I've said those English countries that aren't America are dumber than America is because of the NGOs. I've made this argument for a long time. The per capita brainwashers you have in America versus the per capita brainwashers you have in Canada are not even in the same league. The Canadians, for every American NGO, we have the Canadian equivalent. So the Canadian equivalent, just like there's an Australia equivalent, and I bet you there's a New Zealand equivalent. So they have all these NGO people. So the per capita population that are NGO sludge people, brainwashing usually their own side for their own grift, are so much higher, and that Canadians' brains are just mangled and chopped up way more than American brains. So I might be wrong about that. That's just my observation. I haven't been in every part of America. I've met some rock bottom stupid people in America, but that's not the same as being brainwashed. Being rock bottom stupid, which America probably wins that prize. Canadians have, they're so educated, right? They're so educated. But their education just goes in on itself so they can brainwash themselves more. But again, the fault tolerance, go back to the original idea here. Bitcoiners spreading through memes, spreading very simple information. Again, what we're talking about here with the Japanese trade is the hard money 21 million meme. Very easy for us to propagate that. Very simple. Janet Yellen's over there explaining to the Chinese people, right, that, she doesn't go to say, we got 21 million. If she could do that, she could sell it, right? She's got to go over there and say, but you can't invest in, you can't give Russians microchips because we own Taiwanese microchips, and someone has a microchip, and we're not going to share the microchip, and then the banks have to stop sending the money on this rail, but I don't know about that other rail, but then you got to buy steel from us, and we got to buy your steel, and she doesn't know what she's talking about. Imagine her negotiating. That little fucking troll negotiating, the gnome, the Janet Yellen gnome. Honestly, if Trump really does become a dictator, you know what he should do? He should dress her up like a gnome. And you know how people travel around the world with gnomes and put pictures? He should just do that. He should carry, if he becomes a full dictator, right, which would be great and hilarious, he should dress her up as a gnome and bring her all around the world and like plop her in like the Eiffel Tower and the pyramids. And you'd see Janet Yellen with her dumb face. I'm a gnome. It would be amazing. It would be hilarious. We need him to become a dictator just for that, right? Just for that. That'd be the best. So Fiat, in order, we get to sell 21 million in this environment, the simplest arguments you can imagine, with a memetic army that pretty much can't be stopped. I'm out there giving books on how to deploy memetic warfare, how to conduct memetic warfare on a global scale using the easiest memes you've ever had, have fun staying poor and all these great ones. Meanwhile, Janet Yellen has got to go to Japan and fix their problems next. Fix her problems in Japan next. It ain't gonna work, guys. It's done. They're finished. They're cooked, right? Everything comes down to Janet Yellen's persuasion. That's what it all comes down to. Fiat is literally relying on Janet Yellen now. She's the super node. She's all they have left. If Janet Yellen can't sell this stuff, it all comes down. It's Erin Burnett with her broken brain. And Tedros, the WHO guy, right? Believe me. And you can't count Biden. But that's all they got. That's all they got. So there's no way we can lose this, guys. America has an abundance of idiots. Yeah, I believe that, Hammersaw. But, I lived in Vermont. I don't see it because very simple people, very easy. They're not where I live, especially where I live in Vermont. I'm not in the fancy parts of Vermont. I'm not down. I'm in like the West Virginia of Vermont, right? Where I am it's called the Northeast Kingdom, and the very north of Vermont, Franklin County and all that. This is hillbilly country, right? And I think they're the only two counties, Franklin and Orleans. Those are the two top northernmost counties in Vermont. Total. Like if I go to the gas station, it's all MAGA hats. It's not the same as the rest of Vermont. It's not like Burlington or anything like that, right? So where I am in Vermont, it's just very different, right? So I don't meet that many dumb people there. And I mean, a lot of dumb Trump supporters. I'm not saying you have to be, but they're just simple country people. They're not trying to brainwash me, or they don't even know who Janet Yellen is. They don't care, right? They're not interested. Just solid people, easy to get along with. Wouldn't now, unhealthy criminals, scumbags. We got a lot of those, right? But none of the NGO types. Now, I see it mostly in Canada. And otherwise, I've only lived in New York City. And of course, New York City's great saving grace, the best thing about New York City and Montreal, this is an anomaly for people around the world who don't understand this. One of the things that makes Montreal and New York so similar, as someone who's lived in Toronto, and I've lived in the government cities of Canada, Quebec City and Ottawa as well. That's sort of our DC. I've lived in a lot of these types of places. What separates Montreal and New York from many other major cities in Canada or the United States is there's no government. There's nothing. There's no government. There's a municipal government. So of course there's a municipal government, but there's no federal. There's no provincial. Montreal's not the capital of its province, its state, nor is New York City the capital of its state. These were 100% mercantile banking towns that were not built by any government presence. Toronto is the state capital, right? It's the provincial capital. So you've got all these retards there, and all the NGOs are there, and all the dick-sucking, ass-sucking people are there, right? So it's a major difference. And it's one of the things that made New York so unique. There was nothing in the way for them to be chaotically creative, and Montreal had the same thing at one time. So now to buy Canadian unity and federalism, the federal government started putting federal government entities in Montreal, but hopefully that all leaves when we kick them out, right? Yeah, Quebec City is great. That's where I went to law school. It's very beautiful. I love Quebec City. I mean, I absolutely love it. It's so pleasant and peaceful and quiet and very civilized, and it's the best part of Quebec for that, Whoops. Bonjour depuis la France. Bonjour MC Mandrakia. Oh, bien sûr. Bonjour, bonjour. Voilà, Monsieur Mandrakia. Hello, Mr. This fella came and visited me right here at the yacht club. He was sitting like right over there a little while ago. He sailed here from Africa and Europe. So I'm glad you got home. I guess you flew home. JC was here just a few weeks ago. Real nice to see you here in the chat. There you go. We got a lot of things on Jay Powell is the second scammer. Thoughts on the new PQ leader? I've reached out to him, Kapenta, to talk to him about Bitcoin. I've told him your country is in your grasp. But he doesn't understand Bitcoin, so he's an idiot, right? I'm a Quebec sovereignist, but I am not for their state government, the PQ would institute. I'm for no issuance of money out of Quebec and integration of Bitcoin into Hydro-Quebec system, and then we issue more or less volcano bonds and borrow off of that. So his problem, when I talk to my old sovereignist friends, they ask me, why did you become a sovereignist, right? And if I don't want to go too inside baseball for Quebec for you guys, but this is what you got to know. When we had our referendum in 1995 in Quebec, the leader of the Sovereignist Party, his name is Jacques Parizeau at the time, who was my neighbor. And here's a fun story for all you Quebecers, right? He lived just down the road from me. He's from my town. So if you remember, the night of the referendum was the night before Halloween, what we call Mat Night in Canada, or Devil's Night some places. It was October 30th. So the referendum was October 30th, 1995. And you know what me and my friends did? We went and egged Parizeau's house. We drove our bicycles and threw eggs at his windows. Anyway, because we didn't we were English kids. And weirdly, Parizeau chose to live in the most English town in Quebec. And he interacted with us regularly. He spoke English perfectly. He read English newspapers. I served him in the restaurant 100 times, right? He'd just come in. It was all English. And when I say English, I mean like aristocratic English Canadians who, my village, believe it or not, I grew up in the only village in Quebec that never instituted Bill 101, ever. We had English signs my whole life. We would, if anyone came around, the Quebec can be so stupid, they'll come and measure like the signs, because English has to be half the size of French on all public signs. We never did that. We had zero French, nothing, zero. Nope, get out of here. We got guns. We don't need your fucking signs. So now you'll see French signs because, we're not putting up a political fight about it anymore. And all the English people there are rich and they all speak perfect French. So, and the ones who are not rich just kind of have to learn French now. Most of them have already left though, so there's very few not rich left. And the ones that are there are kind of like the Vermont people. You know, they're there because they can clean stuff up and rake leaves and shit like that, right? Which is great. But here's the thing. Jacques Parizeau, the night of the referendum, when he gave his speech, he was drunk. He was an alcoholic, right? So he's up there. He's a bit wasted. And they say, you know, so he goes to give the concession speech. And what he does is he blames it, right? Now, we were brainwashed about this as an English Canadian when we were young. We were brainwashed about this, right? He came out and said, you know, I'll blame this loss on money and the ethnic vote, is what he said, right? Money and the ethnic vote. And then, of course, Hitler, Nazi, racist, blah, 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 blah. Oh my God, can you believe it? They beat his ass with that racist line for years. I mean, years, right? Now, I at the time was like, yeah, racist. But now that you see what this racist label really is, you see that it's manipulation, right? It took me a long time to figure that out. I bought the line for a long time. Oh, Quebecers are racists, you know, not Quebecers, but sovereignists are racist, right? But the change that I had was when I started to understand money, because here was what happened. And I remember, and this is, I'll bring up my dad again, right? This is one of the neat things my dad taught me even then, because my dad's not English. He's not an English Quebecer. He's a German origin, born in Germany. And so my dad really wasn't with the English folks, and he spoke French and all of this kind of stuff, right? So now he, you know, was way more, he grew up in the English community. We were an English household. We spoke English in the household. We were not part of a French community, really. We were part of the English community, but he wasn't as like fucking, you know, my dad loves Quebecers. He was always, they treated me well in his life, he said. When I came as a kid in the 50s and everybody hated Germans, the French didn't. That's how he learned French, right? Because they would play with him. So at one point in the campaign, the question of money, and this was one that stuck for the stay in Canada side, was that so the Quebecers started the sign, the voting to have your own country in Quebec according to the referendum. Yes, a yes vote was to make Quebec a country. A no vote was to stay in Canada. Now, all the signs were either yes or no in French. Oui ou non, right? So, and then that's it. There were signs everywhere for that referendum, no and oui. Now, the oui signs, the Quebecers did something clever. They would always change in that referendum in 95, the O into some, you know, a daisy for peace or the actual peace sign. And one of them that had oui was the $1 loonie coin, the loon, right? And this triggered Canadians. Canadians like, you can't use our money. You can't use our money, right? They started going crazy with this, and it stuck. It really stuck. You can't use our money. What are you going to do? You know, that's our money. You're not Canada. If you leave our country, you can't have our money. And so I bought that argument at first. I was like, they can't use our money. But my dad said, what's our plan here? Like, are we going to go and take away their money? Are we going to go and break down their doors? Are we going to shut their banks? Are we going to take their assets? If I had American dollars and I'm not an American, what's going on? Can they take the money away? So my dad said it like that. And I was like, yeah, you know, that one never sat right with me even back then. I was like, that doesn't make sense. You're right. How can they go into their houses? How can they go into their bank accounts? Are they going to make them convert the money? That was maybe a question, but they couldn't just do it overnight, right? So once you grok Bitcoin years later, once I understood Bitcoin years later, and then I thought about this question again, I said, indeed, Parizeau was right. The immigrant thing, the ethnic vote thing, that's a scam. And then the money thing was the biggest scam. What was Canada really planning to do? Tanks? Were they going to go and take people's cash out of their hands? Were they going to go into their bank accounts and take their cash? Well, who would want to live in that country, right? I would be on Quebec's side in a heartbeat if that was the case. So it was understanding money that made me realize what Canada was actually doing to Quebec, and that Quebec was in its full rights to either use Canadian money or issue its own money, or decide on using another money altogether, like Bitcoin. So that's what brought me there, right? Um, well, Shift Control Delete is to erase. I needed Control to be in there, and I needed Shift to be in there. That's why Control Alt Delete didn't work. But Shift Control Delete does erase internet history, so it works. I needed Shift and Control and Delete, so basically that's why I did it. So anyway, go back to Quebec and what happened there, and this idea of money and the ethnic vote, and all of that stuff. Um, 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 to me was important. So now we get this guy, the Pierre Paul Plamondon or whatever. His videos suck. He comes off inauthentic, not interested in Bitcoin, probably stupid, probably dumb, right? They need someone who gets Bitcoin if they're going to get anywhere with this. Now, I hope they win, right? I've offered, I knew enough top level Péquistes from when I was at law school in Quebec City. I've reached out to all of them as of last summer. I told them I've got the blueprint, guys. If you want a country, call me. I'll get you a country in no time, right? We're going to fucking smash Canada. So I hope they call. I hope I hear from Plamondon. But right now, he looks like pure politics and a little bit stupid. So only because he hasn't grokked Bitcoin. If he does, I'll change everything I said. And in France, it was Jacques Chirac, right? At the time, yeah, it was Jacques Chirac. Yes, yes. He was still president when I lived in France as well. I was there for the original Le Pen vote, the 2002 election. I had to write a term paper in French on him in high school for punishment. Yeah. Would feel hopeful with Poilievre placing Trudeau and Trump getting USA. The problem with Canada is that I think the election systems are even scammier, and Canadians are too stupid. Trudeau is turning the election system now to 3 days mail-in. So I don't think there's any chance, honestly. I mean, they're going to cheat. There was no way Trudeau won 2015, guys. I knew it. There was no way. It was a scam already then. So, you know, I don't have any confidence in the 2015 situation in Canada. I was gone, but I predicted that it was going to be scammy, and it was a scam. So I know a lot of people say, oh, everybody hates Trudeau. I've known Poilievre for years. Poilievre bought me my first drink. I went to law school. I got a job in the summer that the Conservatives won power in Canada, the summer of 2006. They had won in a January vote, and they formed government in April. I started working there in May, and from law school, summer break, and I had a friend who I went to law school with, who was like a childhood friend with Pierre, and because Pierre's around my age, I think he's a little bit older, but he had just been elected in a by-election about 2 years before, so he had been a member of parliament or a congressman for you Americans from then. And someone said, you guys should go hang out and meet. So we did. We hung out and we became friends. We hung out all the time after. His wife was my colleague. I knew him and his wife when they were just meeting and dating. I would have been one of the first people she even told that it was happening. My secretary and her were really good friends. Their offices were near each other. They talked about this stuff all the time. There you go. Back on my mic. So, but I hope Trudeau is so unpopular that it's possible that Poilievre can win. Poilievre is getting very big crowds, right? Very big crowds. Mom's best friend was from Madawaska, Maine. As a kid, I loved hearing her speak French. Yeah, I love Maine French. I go down to Old Orchard Beach. That's my regular summer beach spot. It's the closest beach to Quebec. It's only about 4 hours from my house, right? 3.5, 4 hours, right through the White Mountains and Bretton Woods and Mount Washington. And so we went there for years. It's a big thing the week after Labor Day, because it kind of shuts down and all the prices go down, to nothing. and it's only for locals really, or people who work in the service industry, which my mother was always a waitress and I worked in the service industries too. So what happens is a lot of people in Quebec who do the Labor Day weekend, which is a huge deal in my town. We have the largest agricultural fair in Quebec in my little village. It's an amazing fair, you know, hundreds of thousands of people come. It's all the animals. It's old and beautiful and full of energy and full of fun. And so when that ends on Labor Day Monday, usually we start driving Monday and you can make it to the beach by nighttime and the rooms are all half price and everything that week. So it's just people from service industry everywhere. And it's French all over the place, native French, not just Quebec visitors. It is the closest beach. So Old Orchard, which is just north of where the Bushes have their Kennebunkport house. So it's a very, very beautiful area. Lobster, lobster, lobster. We have a great time going there. Didn't Canadians hire they voted a high? Yeah, he was the best. I was part of that. I was somewhat part of that. I was a huge fan of Rob Ford. His brother is now the governor of our most populous state. Deb and I went to Maine every summer as a kid in Bridgeton. Loved it. Yeah, it is the best. Love Maine. Maine is one of my favorite states. I heard someone say Vermont is one of our best states up here. I missed that quote, you know. Quebec, Vermont and Michigan, yeah, are the last two parts of real America. I think you might be right. Yeah. I love Vermont. I really do. It's still got what you want from America, right? I'm a huge fan. Yeah, what I really just was I muted this whole time? Oh no, yeah, I fixed it. Yeah, I really just wanted Shift+Control+Delete in there. So, do they really want a country, or is it all a grift like the NGOs? They really do. Yeah. Well, no, they don't. I mean, it's a mix. I think most Quebecers would like a renegotiated deal with Canada. I mean, Canada doesn't work. So now, this is how you have to understand why we even have a country. Justin Trudeau's dad bought Quebec off using Alberta and Ontario at the time money. And the way he did that was we have to do equalization payments, it's called. So the federal government collects the most tax and then distributes the money to the states. But they have to come begging like dogs for treats, right? They have to all come begging like dogs for treats. Otherwise, the federal government won't give it to them. Like, do this, do that, right? And then they get their treat. So Quebec, being a little smarter politically than the rest of Canada, and usually negotiating with themselves. Trudeau was a Quebecer, right? So when Justin Trudeau's dad was prime minister, what he did was he created the formula for these equalization payments. And what they mean are that everyone in Canada has more or less the same amount of public money at their disposal. By public money, that means the taxes that they collect and redistribute. So they have to have an average number. And if your state tax raise and your state economy isn't high enough, then the federal government takes from one province and gives to the other. So really, there's only like one province who gives anymore, and that's Alberta. And the reason is Quebec got the following scam through. That Quebec's hydroelectric power and Hydro-Quebec itself as a public utility, the largest public utility in the world, one of the largest electricity companies on earth. You know why New York City has so many lights? Because our lines reach there. And so because Quebec creates so much energy and power, and it's all hydro, the scam was this. Trudeau removed it from the calculation of Quebec's GDP, which is the formula for the equalization payments, the transfer payments. So Quebec gets to discount all the money it makes from energy, and Alberta doesn't, because it's gas, it's oil. And so they, even though they have this huge engine, creates a ton of money, that all goes out. It all comes to Quebec. Now you should see the shit we have in Quebec, right? Like we have everything. We have the best subway, we have the best public infrastructure. It's awesome. Like the rest of Canada, they got screwed, right? And I'm sorry. Now, the only reason why Canada even exists is because they did this. So he saved it. Justin Trudeau's dad saved it by paying them off. But how long did he save it for, right? It's done. It can't survive this. So Quebec is never going to take less, ever. And now the real issue in Quebec is the immigration. because Quebecers, they're not into Muslim stuff at all, like zero, right? And they've been pretty upfront about it from the beginning. And they tried 20 years ago. They call it the reasonable accommodation debate, which was like, how much do we in Quebec have to change for immigrants? And they brought English people, French people. They ran it all out of McGill. They made a huge public conversation about it. It was a huge national conversation, very civilized, actually, as befitting Quebec. And the conclusion was that Quebec would go full secular. So that means if I want to access public healthcare stuff in Quebec, which I don't, but if I did, I couldn't have on my ID card a cross. If I was Jewish, I couldn't keep my yarmulke on, but it was targeted against hijabis and turbans and all that stuff. So to this day, they can't access anything if they're dressed like that, ever. So it's very shunned in Quebec. And they completely changed. In Canada, that's not the case, right? In Quebec, you can't do any of this stuff. So, because again, if you try and sell victimhood in Quebec, you're at a dead end, because they already identify as victims, as people who were colonized. So you can't they can't be like the colonizers and the colonized. It doesn't make any sense in their brain. So none of that works. So when the immigrant stuff started, they were very upfront. They asked for more control. And the reason why separation has become a big issue now is because of the immigration. It's what's causing the cost of living to go up in Canada. And well, no. They're not Muslim. They're not going to give you shit on the street or anything, and anyone can wear what they want. Yeah, you can wear all that. I'm saying if you want to go in and get healthcare, they're going to make you take it off, right? That's it. And the rule was everybody has to, right? And I don't even think they really do that, but that's the pretension that they do. It's still a great place to visit. There's plenty of Muslim people there. Trust me. There's no lack of Muslim people. But that's what Quebec is complaining about, because Quebec can't control immigration. That's a federal thing. And because they said for years, we don't want this, we don't want that, blah, 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 and Canada never listened to them, that's where the separation has come up. So Muslim Bitcoiner, you'd be very welcomed in Quebec. You don't have to worry about it like that. I'm talking about the sort of systemic levels, right? Systemic stuff, which is totally separate, right? You can visit Quebec and you'll never notice anything like that ever. You'll feel at home, and there are neighborhoods where you would assume that it's completely Muslim. I bet the people who do Ramadan in Quebec have a great setup. I live right on the, I don't really go into Montreal much anymore. When I go to Vermont, I sort of live right, close enough to the bridge, the highway to the bridge, so I just get right out of the island. And I live in the downtown, old Montreal-ish, Lachine Canal-ish kind of part. So if you know Montreal, I get right on the Bonaventure, and then I'm gone. And then I get on the 10 after I cross the bridge, and then I cut down on the new highway, which I say was built purposely for me, the 35. And I can take that right to Vermont, and it's great. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Oh, let me see what's going on Rumble real quick. Didn't check the Rumble stuff. Shut this down. See what the Rumblers are saying. Old Orchard Beach is an hour and a half south from me. Wow, I love Old Orchard. I love Portland. I don't really go further north than that. What do we got here? Later, Courtney, Fellowship of Oddballs. Rumble, sticking in Drew. Coming through now. Okay, good. I was having troubles, yeah. I have one question. Who the fuck is selling for 70K? Do they not understand Bitcoin? Don Boli. Great day, all. No fear. Peace, Nolan. Thanks, Morand. Minimum maximum is a 7th grade calculus problem. Yeah. Good morning, plebs. Almost had the day off as the power went out. I have a generator, but internet always goes out when the power goes out. Yeah. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I hope you all have a great day. I shall see y'all. Monday. What do we got here? My dad told me the head stuff is cultural, not religious, as different Muslims wear different. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Portland is now a shithole. Bummer. The hijab is not the same as the burqa. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. New Hampshire is awesome. Prosperity, prosperity. All right, everyone. Peace.